Welcome back, everybody. Today we're discussing Raised by Wolves, Season 2, Episode 4, titled Control. This episode was an action-packed breath of fresh air compared to the first 3 episodes of the new season. We saw Mother getting her eyes back, Marcus losing his power, Mother killing the trust, Father recreating an ancient alien android, the ancient alien android breaking free, Paul used as a holy hand grenade by the trust, and finally, Campion's love interest killed. Or was it? If it seems like a lot happened, that's because it did. Honestly, maybe too much. I think that this might be highlighting a pacing problem in the second season where the first 3 episodes should have included more of these major moments. And I understand why they did it. It just feels like comparatively, like these first 3 episodes were trash compared to what we just watched. Perhaps all of the future episodes of the season will continue with this quicker pace, in which case I would be satisfied with the slow build-up that we got to this point. Since we already know most of the drama of the situation, we can really get into the shoes dropping and Chekhov's guns being fired, and I am ready for that. The episode begins with the Mithraic congregation standing guard, dealing with the children who arrived at the end of episode 3. We see some nice moments between Paul and Marcus. Paul talks about the seed of the soul tree that is, still back with the trust. It's in the tarantula, and how he is going to help them get that. Which, because of how this episode ends, we know that he is firmly, once again, on the inside, and once again, maybe ready to be that good little child soldier and help out with their religious crusade. During this conversation, we see Marcus being a genuinely good father, expressing regret over him being a child soldier before when he stole Mother's eyes, and how it was Marcus's idea to kill Paul's parents and take their place on the Ark. He is doing everything he morally needs to do to right what he's done up until now and present an open opportunity for Paul to be the one to decide if he wants Marcus to be in his life. And that's great. And luckily for Marcus, Paul does. Based on everything he's done, it's going to be hard to see him in a positive light, but it feels like they're going to make him have this good religious guy persona that will represent the positive change with the church instead of being the oppressive force that it had become back on Earth. Also, during this conversation, Paul brings up hating Sue simply because she doesn't believe in soul and is an atheist. Now, I think that's representing that old way of thinking. Now, a good father here should recognize this and try to be that positive change before he is too far gone down this radical track. However, with this soul or transmission voice still being in existence, still being some kind of presence in this story, I think Paul will be manipulated to continue this insane way of thinking and perhaps show the atheists that the Mithraic are not to be trusted. It thrives on chaos because when there is chaos amongst the humans, it can then continue its master plan in the shadows. And I think maybe we're going to see Marcus representing a positive change for the church and Paul representing, the old way of thinking, and then still him being manipulated by this soul voice to cause the chaos and cause this great divide that ultimately allows soul to do whatever it wants. The last major thing I want to talk about this very first short conversation at the start of the episode is the dynamic between Marcus and Paul as orphans that both could theoretically be this prince that was promised, this prophet that they've mentioned an orphan boy prophecy multiple times in relation to Paul and in relation to Marcus. I wonder if it represents that divide in the church or just foreshadows this future conflict between the two. That's the thing about prophecies, right? Like, who is the authority that would actually look at the grand picture of their lives and go, yep, it's you. You're Gandhi now. That's what you do now. It just feels like that would never happen. So maybe it's just a title for those wanting power to claim for themselves in order to justify their position and maybe justify that future bad behavior under the guise of being a prophet. Machiavellian, it's all, it all makes sense if you just do this and you trust in me, you believe in me, and we'll kill everybody, but hey, we'll be happy at the end of that. Something like that. I don't know. I think this dynamic is it's just really interesting to me. And I'll be curious to see if they develop more towards that, competitive aspect of both of them maybe being the prophet.
I wish I had necro eyes.
But then nobody could look at you.
Bro, if this was not the smoothest pickup line between human and android, I don't know what is. Maybe something in binary would have been better, but my boy is trying to get some robot booty, and I respect the hustle. Then it happens. The Trust uses Paul as live bait and proves just how poorly it handles utilitarian decision-making. Later, it is describing its actions to Mother as doing what it was doing for the good of collective, how being a parent and how being the person that leads humanity are two different things. But that's the thing with this, utilitarian programming governor, right? You can only make decisions until you're making choices that infringe upon a single person's body autonomy. They made that choice that would ensure the most amount of happiness and or success for the future, but they did it to one of this fucking God's children, and for that they died. But more on that later on. Now, while Paul is becoming the Gaiam Restore vibrating foot roller, now sold on Amazon, we have this brief moment where his eyes change to snake eyes, which is amazing. To me, it shows one of two things, or I'm completely wrong. Either the Trust is already studying and weaponizing the snake, which is pretty likely, or this is a clue that the atheist technology is somehow linked to the cyclical story of humanity coming and going from Earth and Kepler 22b. Like, the technology to do this is the same technology that made the snake possible to begin with and, able to grow inside of Mother's android womb. And it's letting us know that, hey, it doesn't matter if it's atheist or Mithraic tech, it was all influenced by the ancient scripture that was sent to Earth all of those years ago, and it's just coming full circle. This would also further blur the lines of us just considering the Mithraic the stupid religious people that were potentially manipulated to destroy the Earth and come to Kepler. Now it shows that this is humanity itself as the target. Right. And I think it's always kind of shown that, but it doesn't just, it's not just the Mithraic tricked to be the bad guys, right? It's, this more of this like humanity cannot change and must always be at war kind of factor that I talked about in the 1 through 3 video. How it's this cycle of violence and us not being able to change and acknowledge that we are violent and to stop fucking attacking each other. But they just used religion to make it happen. Getting off topic though, lo siento, mi amores. Marcus makes a plan to save Paul while protecting the others, ensuring that Soul will provide. Campion makes a run for it, knowing Mother could help, and then the android and this crazy dude with a gun runs after both of them. Like, I hate this character. I hate this character so much. I don't want to ever see them. I don't know. We return to these two talking about giving the baby away and the showrunners reminding us that Father is a dad joke god.
I hope your ears were not damaged by the cheers my victory elicited. Am I not the toughest generic service model ever built?
Look at his face. I would fucking die for this man. Can someone Google if he's married and comment below? I honestly don't have the heart to look. I can't tell if I like him so much because I'm bi, or if I just want a strong father figure in my life, but either way, I want to call him daddy. Anyway, they discuss this dynamic that I talked about previously, where Father is embracing his children's beliefs without casting judgment, still finding it illogical, but not shitting all over it and saying that it's outright useless. Later, when Father asks for the medallion for good luck to restore the ancient alien android, it further aids this merging, them moving closer to blending of atheist and Mithraic that aren't as radical as either side during the war. Again, you can believe in stuff and still, not believe in stuff, and it doesn't matter. He waterboards the ancient alien android and leaves right before it sucks it all up, which I don't want to pick apart this storyline because this character's motivations are pretty chaotic. Since learning that Mother had cybersex with the voice, TM, and we can see him having some trauma related to that when he also gets upset about the idea that Mother came and destroyed his project. Like he can't have anything to himself. He is now more lonely than ever and just really doesn't know how to express that. He's having some feelings under the surface, and before it was feeling like he couldn't provide for, as a protector compared to Mother. I wonder if that will emerge again now that she has her eyes back. Anyway, my point is, this was so reckless, like wildly reckless just to recreate this thing. It clearly shows some degree of life, no? And he's just like, I don't know anything about this, but I want to dump shit on it. Like Mother just created a fucking killer snake, that tried to well, I mean, I guess the snake ultimately hasn't done anything wrong, but like, why? I don't know. Maybe it's just that. Maybe he wants to create, right? And he sees this as an opportunity to do what Mother did and feel some kind of way about being I don't want to say a real parent, right? But like being someone who brings life into the world, essentially, right? But it feels like Frankenstein's monster, but instead of killing its creator, I think it's going to love Father for recreating it. And I think it's probably a her. And then it's probably also not going to do some nice things to everybody else in the equation. I think either way, Father is smashing, and that's a win in my book. Vita is having some on-the-nose philosophical debate about killing her mother, which ends in Mother breaking the Xbox and being an absolute Karen. Come on, don't do this to your kids. Sue stares at the snake and then talks to Mother, who killed a bird and then tried to make it into a controllable drone. It's honestly the weirdest thing about this episode, and maybe shows us that she too is willing to kill for the greater good, which, yeah, we already knew that, right? She do be killing. Like she weighed this bird's life and found it lesser, just as the trusted. It also again shows this link between organic and robotic and how she plans to control something. Like explicitly she's saying it's for the snake, but again it feels like it's symbolic of this being exploitable. Like she has this power and it could be applied to anything. Like she could use it on whomever she wishes to control. It also has a flaw worth noting, which is the range of control. And I think that all of these being introduced in the same, very quick paced, like just thrown it in, it feels like they're going to bring this back in some kind of way. And that's why they, showed exactly how it works and then showed a vulnerability to it. And I think that they're going to use that to have a larger reveal later on. And I think that larger reveal later on is going to be pretty cool. It's also similar to how Soul or the voice was speaking to people. And this idea of the transmission now being out of range. It's this like radio wave-esque system that somehow to me feels identical, because now we're seeing Mother use this with the bird, and it feels like they're building to the reveal that this technology that they have now is the same technology that they had back then, further showcasing this cyclical migration plot that I've talked about, again, multiple times. And then we go down to the river to pray. And oh, brother, where art thou? This was a great reveal. I absolutely knew something was going to be living in this acid water, because water is the start of all life. And it's been in the background every time they show like, nature of any kind. It's just like looming over us this entire time. It's a great way to show additional life in the tropical zone. And this acid mer people thing looked very well designed. Campion goes full Abe on his fishman brother in order to save the android.
You killed an organic being to ensure that the synthetic being would keep operating. Why?
Proving that he genuinely sees robots and every other being as equals. Like, if he isn't being positioned to become the leader of humanity, I don't know who possibly could, right? I think the other issue will be nepotism. The only thing that's going to stop this and him being the leader of all mankind is nepotism, and how the systems of power end at the end of this episode. Based on everything that happened, we know that Mother will be making this choice, and she has already told us explicitly that she wants Campion to be in this leadership position, and she's wanted this for the longest time. Now that he is showing the signs of a good moral leader in private, we know that he will be a good moral leader of people, and we've known that for a while now, I think. And Mother knows that he will be a good leader based on his upbringing, but the rest of humanity doesn't know. So when he's chosen, it will create a massive divide. Maybe create this symbolic East and West schism of people. I think it could also include the Mithraic, and how Campion would have little issue with religious people and androids in his sect. But most atheists wouldn't, right? And getting way outside of the scope of this video now, I do believe that this divide of people and maybe the separation of mankind on this planet is entirely possible. The moron with a gun does exactly what morons with guns do and helps absolutely nothing, while Campion escapes with the help of Father's light being. Right away, this reminds me of Soul, and later, Campion says exactly the same. I have to imagine in the previous iteration of humanity, these were just the robots that operated in a similar sense to the necromancers do now. And then perhaps people came to worship them, believing this to be divinity, when there was a technological reason for this being existing this entire time. You know, like Robert Ford says, everything in the world is magic except to the magician. It is interesting that it chose to help Campion. Like, this indifferent being could have had a billion different reactions to this show of force, or this equation entirely. But I have to imagine that it saw a defenseless child being hunted by an armed man and chose to help the child. And of course, with that, it's, you know, it had to be able to identify weapons. It had to be able to identify purpose and feeling, and it had to observe all of these things. So we have great technology of, you know, where was this creature before it was just suddenly bursting into light, right? Can it go invisible? Can it just see, you know, far and wide and hear everything? And that's how it, you know, knew to be there. Perhaps this was its caretaking programming, just like Mother's. The only difference is that Mother would have just blown this dude up. And I have to imagine that the creations of the former species maybe were much more level-headed, and this just represents like the cycle of humanity getting more and more vicious, right? Like, before it just shined light, and now we're blowing people up because they look at Campion the wrong way. Or maybe it just doesn't have its full power back, and, you know, it's still full of holes like this is. Either way, one or the other. Mother preps to implant the control chip into something. It's implied the snake, but Campion runs over and alerts her to Paul's condition. I didn't catch this on my first or second watch, but as Campion runs off, and Mother is looking back, she's looking back to the table that she was working at. She's looking back at the control panel. I think the implication is that this could have been the snake's doing from her perspective. I'm not saying that it is. I'm saying from her perspective, this is the perfect circumstance being created that stops him from getting that control plant right as she is prepping her tools to do so. And this look feels like Mother is questioning if it's the snake or not. You know, if that's ultimately who's responsible for avoiding her control. We return to these bastards hurting this poor girl, and the way it was shot, beautiful, ominous, monstrous, well done here. During the encounter, the robot decides to talk shit for one last time, which I would too. Talk that shit, baby girl. The most, you know, important thing of this encounter is exactly the line about breaking her daughter's neck. She is clearly enraged, right? She has this dark passenger inside of her, and I wonder when exactly this is going to explode. She broke her daughter's neck and now kills her robot daughter. It's clearly showing us that she cannot be trusted around kiddos, and I wonder why. I do think this android can be rebuilt with the tools that are available now, or maybe even with the ancient alien that Father resurrected. I think that would be pretty interesting if they had some hand in her resurrection as well. It's probably not dead. That's all I'm going to say. Mother comes back, politely asks for her child and her eyes back, and leaves Marcus with that oh so tragic empty feeling in his stomach. Mother now has her weapons of mass destruction, and we see that she intends to use them to the fullest of their capability. She quietly discusses what the Trust did to Paul, and after using the super secret catchphrase to enter,
"Open the door, or I will destroy the ship."
She makes her presence known. She makes her way to the Trust, talks to them about their mistake in decision-making, and turns off the government in order to replace it with her own moral judgment. On one hand, same. Fuck these guys. I would absolutely do the same. On the other hand, this is a serious fallacy here. When you take control over another organization by killing the people's champion, right? Both of these were programmed beings made by the same creator, which that line actually makes me feel uncomfortable. It's been used a couple times now, like they want us to know that Campion Sturgis made both of these beings for some reason. And maybe it's the idea that, you know, this is the cyclical plot where everything is ultimately influenced by the scriptures and it's all made for the greater purpose of manipulating humanity. Or they're hinting that the same issues that exist in the Trust exist in Mother. The Trust dies, the collective erupts into chaos, and Mother tries to assure them that the killer robot will be their protector, and that she has no interest in power, once again speaking as the most powerful being ever created by this version of humanity. She and Marcus have a moment, and it shows that she no longer feels the same way about him. Like he could be losing his power over these people who once saw soul inside of him, but maybe it was just the power radiating from Mother's eyes. Father finds the trashed room, and this episode ends with the future baby mama coming back to his arms. I'm pumped to see how this develops from this point in the story, and I hope that you are as well. With that, we come to the end of the episode. If you enjoyed this, please be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more content just like this in the future. Special thank you to everyone who supports me over on Patreon, including our highest tier donor, Michael Linck. Much love, everybody, and I cannot wait to talk to you all again soon.